The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon, shattering the silence I had painstakingly maintained while poring over my studies and dreams. I was in the living room, surrounded by books, notes, and a few half-read journals, when I glanced at the screen and saw that the call was from Will. My brother, the one person I had always trusted, or so I had believed. Will rarely called me, and when he did, it was usually to discuss trivial matters or to grumble about self-created problems. But today something in his voice struck me as different. I answered without haste, though a slight twinge of apprehension tightened in my chest. I expected the usual mundane conversation, perhaps another excuse or even a request for money. What I heard, however, left me utterly breathless. "I used your study fund to pay off my betting debts. You never needed it." For a long, heart-stopping moment, it felt as if time had frozen. My heart pounded and my trembling hands gripped the phone as if to anchor me in reality. That single sentence, uttered with a chilling calm, seemed to nullify years of relentless effort, sacrifice, and painstaking dedication. I had worked tirelessly to save that money, earning scholarships with sweat and tears, juggling exhausting jobs, and foregoing sleep to save every precious cent, all to secure a promising future. And now my very own brother Will had brazenly used that sacred fund to pay off his gambling debts, without even a trace of remorse. There was no elaborate explanation, just that icy declaration, as though he wished to inform me that, to him, my future was nothing more than a disposable resource. I drew a deep, steadying breath, determined to conceal the pain, and replied in an emotionless tone, "Well, enjoy it then." Will laughed. A laugh that, to my ears, came off as more arrogant than amused. "That's my girl, always so rational. You know I needed that money more than you did. You'll figure something out, Scarlett." I closed my eyes and allowed his words to echo in my mind. He really believed I would passively accept this betrayal, that I would swallow that humiliation as I had done so many times before. But this time something inside me hardened. If he believed that I didn't need the money, that the study fund, the fruit of countless sacrifices, was merely a reserve to be exploited, then he was about to learn the hard way what happens when the money stops flowing. My mind surged with both anger and sorrow. For years, I had been solely responsible for funding my education and often discreetly assisting the family during hard times. I had taken pride in my independence, in the fact that I had fought alone for every achievement. Now my own brother, who had always promised to stand by me, had used that resource to feed a destructive gambling habit I never imagined existed in him. Sitting there with the phone still warm in my hands, I realized that my trust in Will was irreparably shattered. The tears that threatened to spill were stifled by a newfound determination I had never known before. If he thought I would simply accept this betrayal without protest, he was gravely mistaken. From that very moment, the idea of turning the tables began to crystallize in my mind. I would no longer be the passive victim of an irresponsible brother. I would become the architect of my own destiny. As the late afternoon light slowly faded into a dusky twilight, I began to plan my revenge. Every sacrifice I had made, every ounce of effort invested in securing my future, transformed into fuel for a quiet yet determined uprising. I knew I had to protect what was mine, and if Will continued to act with such impunity, he would have to pay dearly, not only for depleting my study fund but also for shattering the trust we once shared. I ended the call and closed the phone with a resolute snap. In that moment, a fierce determination surged within me. Scarlett was ready to fight for my future. If my brother dared to convert my hard-earned investment into a mere gambling chip, then he would soon learn that the true value of money lies in its power to build dreams rather than destroy them. And from now on I would choose to build my own. I spent the rest of the day lost in thought, my mind teeming with plans and strategies. I recalled every scholarship earned, every exhausting night spent saving money. Each memory, once a source of pride, now fueled the fire of rebellion. Will's betrayal became not merely a wound but the catalyst for my liberation from the emotional and financial dependency that I had unknowingly maintained. As darkness fell outside and the room grew dim with the gentle glow of a solitary lamp, I felt an inner transformation taking shape. It was not just the pain of betrayal, it was the birth of a burning resolve, a promise to myself that I would never again allow my future to be tarnished by my own brother's mistakes and irresponsibility. The game had only just begun, and I vowed to ensure that every step I took from that moment onward would reclaim the power I had lost. In that quiet, determined night, I made a promise to myself. I would no longer be the sacrificial lamb in this dysfunctional family. I would no longer be the one who endlessly bled for others while watching my dreams wither away. I would seize control of my destiny regardless of the cost. And when the time came, I would let Will, and everyone else, experience the true consequences of their actions. I closed my journal, placed my pen aside, and stared at the darkened screen of my phone. The weight of his words lingered, but so did the promise of a new beginning. The betrayal had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. I smiled to myself, not with malice but with a steely resolve. I was ready. The game was on. It had been 3 intense days since that devastating phone call, since the moment Will, without a trace of guilt, admitted to using my study fund to pay off his betting debts. Over those 3 days, the notion that I would simply accept his actions without retaliation gradually dissolved, replaced by an unyielding conviction that he would have to pay dearly for his transgression. During that time, my brother carried on with the same cold detachment as if nothing had changed. He continued to assume that I would always put family first, that I would bear his shortcomings and sacrifice my own future without question. But he was unaware that I, Scarlett, was meticulously plotting something far grander: the downfall of a brother who had consistently abused my trust. The morning after that shattering revelation, I resolved that it was time to act. I went directly to the bank, determined to obtain the statements for the account linked to my study fund. I needed to see with my own eyes the extent of the devastation Will had wrought. As I scrutinized the documents, I was not surprised to find a series of alarming withdrawals. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, and on one single day 15,000, as if my fund had been emptied note by note, with no hint of remorse or concealment. What shocked me most, however, was the destination of every transaction. Every single withdrawal had been transferred to a local casino's account. My own brother had not used that money to settle a debt. He had gambled it away in the futile hope of doubling his winnings, and predictably he lost it all. Still reeling from the discovery, I returned home. In the middle of the afternoon, my phone rang again. Glancing at the screen, I saw it was Will. A cold smile spread across my lips as I answered. "Hi, brother." This time his voice sounded noticeably different, less confident and laced with a nervousness I had never before detected. "I need your help," he stammered hesitantly, as if the full weight of his actions was beginning to crush him. I raised an eyebrow and, with a trace of irony in my tone, asked, "With what, Will?" After a long pause, he finally confessed. "The guys at the casino, they want the rest of the money. And I don't have it." I closed my eyes, absorbing that moment with calculated, icy detachment. My brother, the very person responsible for obliterating the only resource I had to secure my future, was now completely cornered. He had always maintained that I never needed that money, that I was entirely self-sufficient. Now the tables had turned. He was the one in desperate straits. "What a predicament," I remarked coolly, savoring every syllable. For a brief moment there was silence, and then his voice, trembling now, emerged. You can't help me?" I allowed a small, controlled smile to cross my face as I replied in a measured tone. "I can't. I'm out of money, remember? You drained it all." He drew a shaky breath, struggling to contain his panic. "Just a little to calm things down. Then I'll fix it." I tilted my head, feigning thought, then said firmly, "You know what's ironic, Will? You always said I didn't need that money. But now, who's the one desperate?" His voice cracked as he tried to justify himself. "It was a mistake. I thought I could win. But now I'm trapped." "What bad luck, isn't it?" I replied with a bitter laugh. After another moment of silence, his voice, heavy with indignation, shifted tone. "You think you can just abandon me? I'm your brother." "Abandon him?" I barely managed a cold, mirthless laugh. "And you thought you could simply steal from me, Will?" I took a deep, steadying breath, drawing strength from all the sacrifices I had made, and replied decisively, "Figure it out, Will." Without waiting any longer, I hung up the phone. In that very moment, I realized that all I had to do was wait for the inevitable chaos to unfold. He still did not understand that, for the first time ever, I would not rush to rescue him. The game was now in motion, and I was determined to ensure that he would feel the full weight of every misguided decision he had made. Throughout the rest of that day, while tension loomed like an impending storm, I mentally reviewed every single transaction on the bank statement. Each withdrawal served as irrefutable evidence that my study fund, the culmination of years of effort and sacrifice, had been squandered on reckless gambling. And with that knowledge, I began outlining the next steps to turn this situation around. As the evening approached and darkness crept over the sky, I envisioned the consequences. The bank seizing the assets that secured my future, creditors pounding on doors, and inevitably Will, who had once believed himself invincible, now cornered by his own irresponsibility. I, Scarlett, was ready to turn the tables and force him to taste the bitter sting of defeat. It took only 2 days after Will's last call for his carefully constructed reality to begin crumbling. 2 days had passed since I, without hesitation, hung up on him, making it unequivocally clear that this time I would not come running to his rescue. Now he was entirely on his own, and I, with a detachment bordering on clinical, watched as the spectacle of his despair unfolded. That morning, while I sipped my coffee with an almost unnerving calm, my cell phone vibrated incessantly on the table. When I finally checked, I saw 20 missed calls from Will. Soon after, messages began pouring in, each one brimming with panic. "Will, please call me. This is getting out of control. Will, they came to our house. They said if I don't pay there will be consequences. Will, I made a mistake, okay? But you can't just ignore me." I rolled my eyes and continued drinking my coffee, my inner resolve hardening with each desperate message. He was in a state of panic, exactly what I had anticipated. I thought to myself, well, that's precisely what I wanted. It was both satisfying and inevitable to see that the brother who had betrayed my trust and drained my future was finally beginning to crumble under the pressure. Not long after, the phone rang again. This time I answered promptly. "Hi, Will," I said, my voice calm and icy, exuding absolute control. On the other end, all I could hear was his heavy, shaky breathing, a clear indication of his escalating distress. "You need to help me," he murmured, his voice quivering with fear. I smiled inwardly and replied coolly, "I think I don't need to." His voice grew more agitated. "This isn't a joke. Those guys at the casino aren't the type to let a debt slide." I tilted my head, feigning contemplation, and said, "But you always found a way, didn't you? That's what you told me when you emptied my study fund." For a moment he went silent. Then his voice emerged, now harsher and laced with anger. "Listen here, Scarlett. I'm your brother. You owe me something." I laughed coldly. "Funny, Will. That's exactly what you said when you stole my future." The tension on the line mounted. His voice became hoarse, filled with both anger and desperation. "Are you going to let me die?" My response was as icy as steel, devoid of any empathy. "No, Will. You did this on your own." I hung up the phone firmly. At that moment, it became clear that the true chaos was just beginning. Will still did not understand that, for the very first time, I was not willing to risk my future to save him. While he floundered alone amid the consequences of his reckless gambling, I remained an impassive observer, determined to watch every fragment of his crumbling empire. For the remainder of the day, I kept a vigilant eye on every notification and every frantic message that arrived. My heart, which had once tirelessly labored to secure a stable future, had now become a detached spectator to the collapse of a brother who had once thought himself untouchable. Every alert, every desperate call served as a stark reminder of the profound betrayal and the pain I had endured. As dusk settled and the sky darkened, the situation grew ever more dire. Will, who had always carried himself with an air of invincibility, began to show unmistakable signs of despair. I knew that soon the inevitable would occur, the final crushing consequence of his imprudent choices. And as chaos enveloped him, I remained resolute, determined not to offer any more help in exchange for his suffering. The phone rang once again, but this time the call came from an unknown number. I glanced at the screen with a mixture of curiosity and cautious anticipation, and answered without hesitation. "Hello." A deep, serious voice emerged from the other end. "You're Will's daughter, right?" A cold smile spread across my face as I recognized that, at last, a new piece was falling into place in the puzzle of my brother's downfall. "Depends. Who's speaking?" The man snorted, and soon his voice took on a threatening tone. "Your brother is in deep trouble. He owes us a substantial sum, and it seems he has no way to pay." I crossed my legs and leaned back in my chair, ensuring my tone remained calm and measured. Ah, how interesting. And what does that have to do with me? He said that you might be able to sort this out. I chuckled quietly, recalling with grim amusement Will's arrogant claim that I never needed that money. The man fell silent for a moment before his tone shifted again. Look, girl, I don't usually meddle in your family's problems. But the fact is, he owes us and someone is going to have to pay that bill. I sighed, feigning remorse. Well, it certainly won't be me. Are you sure about that? Because if he doesn't pay, you know how these things work. I raised an eyebrow and answered firmly. Yes, I know. And you've already found out. Will has no assets, nothing in his name to offer. The man hesitated, and I knew he had already discovered the truth. My brother had nothing. And I, Scarlett, was the only one who could, if I wished, bail him out. But I wasn't going to do that. I think he'll have to deal with this on his own. Good luck. I ended the call without a backward glance. 2 hours later, the phone rang again. It was Will. I answered solely to hear the desperation seeping through his voice. What did you do? He exclaimed, unable to mask his panic. I smiled coldly and replied. Nothing. I just let things happen. You can't abandon me. They're going to destroy me, he pleaded, his voice frantic and trembling. I sighed, my tone edged with impatience. And why should I care? You're the one who stole my future. He spoke quickly, his voice raw with nervousness. Because I'm your brother. I closed my eyes for a long moment and then finally said what needed to be said. No, Will. You lost that right the moment you stole from me. A long, final silence followed on the other end before he hung up. I never heard from Will again. He vanished, perhaps fleeing, perhaps left alone to face the consequences of his own choices. And truthfully, I don't care. For the first time in my life, I was truly free of him. He had believed he could gamble with my future, but in the end, he lost everything. What did you think of this story of revenge and justice? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me which moment was your favorite. Would you have done something differently? Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and don't miss any of our stories full of twists and impactful endings.